On today's episode of Talk Legal to Me, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Brook Choulet. She is a psychiatrist who owns Choulet Performance Psychiatry. She's a mom. She's an entrepreneur who started her practice during medical residency, and she's worked with some of the top professional athletes on mental health issues. She talks about different issues that come up in her practice area. This is a jam-packed episode. You're going to love it. Well, hello, Dr. Choulet.
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited.
Let's do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What is a favorite book or podcast that you're listening to?
Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books.
Oh, okay. Awesome. I've got to put that on my reading list.
And Buy Back Your Time is another amazing one.
Okay, awesome. Any podcast that you're listening to, aside from this one, that you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Everyone has to listen to this podcast.
I honestly spend my time driving, listening to music, and decompressing. So that is kind of my downtime and what I use to decompress. So I'm not super good at listening to podcasts.
And then what about a favorite like workout routine, or what do you like to do to kind of, do your own wellness?
I love pickleball.
Okay, cool.
I do love playing pickleball. That was my baby shower theme at 37 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, I was out there on the pickleball court, but I also just love walking my daughter in our neighborhood.
Oh,
just
awesome.
Going back to basics of just walking, being outside, and spending that quality time with her.
That's great. Yeah. And do you feel like it's really important for people to kind of get like that sense of nature?
Yeah, just being outside and moving early in the day. So starting your day outside with movement, I tell my patients, even if it's 5 minutes is all you can do, you'll actually just feel better during the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's the last concert that you've went to?
Ooh, last concert. I mean, it's been a while because we have a toddler.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think. I think the best concert I've been to is Tomorrow World or Land. It's one of the Tomorrowland in Belgium. So I did the one in Belgium and it was amazing. Yes.
That's awesome.
Well, it's not like American festivals where it's all about the like what you're wearing and doing and whatever. It's just like Europeans loving the music in rain jackets outside. It's the best. Yes.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I love it. I love watching it like stream. I'm like, I want to do that one day. It's like a bucket list.
It. Yes.
That's awesome. How did you get into mental health? What sparked your interest?
Yeah, so I went to a 6-year Bachelor MD program from high school all the way in Kansas City, Missouri. So I left my family in California and went through all the different rotations. But my mom and grandpa are also psychiatrists. So I kind of knew from the get-go that that's where my heart was drawn to.
That's very cool. What was that like growing up?
Everyone always asks that. I feel like it's either all good or all bad. But for me, my mom was my best friend growing up. And for me, I think she really knew how to handle raising children because she was a child psychiatrist. And it was just the best.
That's great. Yeah. I love that. So you have your own practice. Tell everyone what your practice is called.
Yeah, so it originally started as Choulet Wellness, and I'm sure we'll dive into branding later. But to me, wellness just became such a diluted term. And I feel like anyone from an esthetician to a psychiatrist to a chiropractor, no matter what your specialty is, can use the word wellness. And so I really wanted to laser focus in on what we actually do really well. And that's where I came up with Choulet Performance Psychiatry. So 4.5 years into the business, we rebranded just a few months ago. And now we really focus on really performance psychiatry.
That's amazing. And talk about like some of the approaches that you use, like holistic versus medicine.
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's so many different components that go into someone feeling better, right? It's not like having strep throat and it's like, oh, well, here's this antibiotic and you're going to feel better tomorrow. So I really try to get to understand the whole person, what they enjoy doing, what they don't enjoy doing, what sucks time out of their day, what sucks joy out of their day, and really get to know anything from their relationships to their nutrition to the medications they're taking. And sometimes it's as easy as, okay, you're on way too many supplements and that's what's keeping you up at night is this, and this has caffeine. And so really just looking at the whole person.
Wow, that's really interesting. I love how you deep dive and you like really get to the bottom of the issue so you can find out what's really going on with the person.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, I know you've worked with a lot of athletes too. What are some of the mental health issues or struggles you found them facing? Because we see them larger than life. They're like achieving, crazy awesome goals in the sports field, but they're human too.
Right. And that's what's interesting. Just what you said, right? Is that we see them as achieving all these crazy goals, but we have to think about them as people just like us are really critical about themselves and their
Sure.
performance. And is with the trade deadlines coming up, like, am I going to get cut from the team I'm on? And there's a lot of confidence, concerns and a lot of imposter syndrome sometimes of like, why do I deserve to be here? Am I even as good as everyone else on my team? And then added to that, the layer of everyone's salaries being public. So imagine if, let's say, you're in a group law office or a group medical practice and everyone's salary is just posted on Google for you, right? So that adds an entirely different dynamic to it of, okay, is my worth then tied to that dollar sign on my contract?
That's very interesting. I never really even thought about that. But yeah, there's a lot of probably imposter syndrome that goes on, and having just like everyone judge you, and like with every game that you play and move that you make, it's a lot. It can be a lot.
Yeah, and I hate seeing the comments on social media of like, well, you shouldn't be complaining, you have this much money. And I think we all hopefully know that money does not buy happiness.
Sure.
And that there's a lot of other components that go to us feeling happy every day. And a lot of times people miss the fact that athletes, just like everyone else, even at that high of a level, look at Simone Biles and what she said publicly, struggle with things.
Sure. I love that there's awareness around that, and people are becoming more comfortable sharing their own personal stories, and they have a platform to share it on, and then people can relate to them if they're like struggling privately. What are some traits of high performance mindset that you see that's pretty common?
I would say the biggest one is grit. And it goes back to kind of that passion plus perseverance formula, right? Is having grit is what's going to allow you to continue to get up and go to practice when you're on a losing streak, or continue to take shots when you've been missing your last several. And having grit truly is an important characteristic for people that have a high performance mindset or are trying to develop that.
That's great. We see a lot of discussions on grit, especially just like on social media and in the media. And it's like, yeah, that's really important to have, because you just kind of feel like defeated. And so how do you just keep going? So that's really what kind of seems to keep people going, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then on the other, end of that spectrum too is the things that really stall people out when they're trying to develop a high performance mindset is being impacted by the noise around them. And what I mean by that is I'm a big believer in that if someone says something positive to you or negative, right, a compliment or a criticism, it should not impact your level of self-worth. Right. So if I told you like, you're the best lawyer, you're so amazing, you go girl, that might feel really good, but it should not impact your level of self-worth. It shouldn't make you think, oh yeah, because Brooke said that to me, I'm a better lawyer today. Like I'm actually doing, you know what I mean? Like, and if someone insults you, it shouldn't make you, if a client's unhappy with how a case resolved, like their negative feedback should not impact your level of self-worth of your ability as an attorney.
Sure.
And so that I think is a big pitfall that people often fall into is they are seeking that external validation and positive feedback, or getting really bogged down by negative criticism, which is so prevalent on social media, especially for athletes.
Sure. And how do you think also like social media has impacted our society today with regard to mental health versus before? Because growing up without social media was really nice.
Yeah.
I feel there was nothing documented. We didn't have to really compare. It was freeing.
And that's, again, where if you have a strong sense of self-worth, you're not going to be wavered by what you see on social media. And that comes with maturity and time too. So for the teen girls that I see in my office on social media, it's really hard when you see all your friends on Instagram on their story at someone's birthday party that you weren't invited to.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't have to experience that. It was just like, oh, I'm enjoying my weekend, not even wondering what anyone else is doing.
Sure.
So I think in terms of how it's negatively impacted people, just seeing what's going on around you, you have to, again, it goes back to having a strong sense of self to not be negatively impacted by it.
How do you build a sense of self in kids? I mean, that's something like as a mom and having, my daughter exposed to kids with already cell phones and social media. Like, how do I go about as a mom or a parent to build that sense of self in her?
I think it goes with building self-worth and autonomy, right? And not saying, I'm so proud of you, you're so amazing, you're the best daughter in the world, which we'd all love to say, but saying, wow, I saw how hard you worked on that. You must be really proud that you got an A on that test. You put in a lot of effort and your efforts were rewarded, right? That's a different way of framing it, where then they take ownership of those thoughts. And they're like, yeah, you're right. I did work really hard and I am proud of myself, versus, oh, my mom just always says she's proud of me.
Right. Yeah, that's quite different actually. And it's just, I feel like it takes intention and effort to just phrase it that certain way to get the quite different outcome.
Exactly. And it's still being positive, and it's still telling your child in a way that you're identifying that they should be proud or that they did something positive, but allowing them to own that rather than you just bestowing it upon them.
Sure. You're empowering them, because if they're always reliant upon you
for validation,
it kind of turns into some senses of narcissism maybe, or
just enmeshment. So as your child gets older, they're just seeking that constant validation from you. So if your child brings home that report card in 11th grade, they're like, Mom, what do you think? Aren't you happy? Aren't you proud?
Sure.
And now it's kind of tough to undo, because you've just spent years telling them how proud you are and telling them when they should be proud.
Okay, I've got some more intentional work to do as I'm complimenting my kids to make sure that they take ownership of their own successes.
Yes, it's never too late.
No, it's such a nuance. And I'm sure like we all make the mistake of being like, I'm so proud of you. I love you. You're so great. But like really taking it that one step further to build that sense of self.
Exactly.
What about like affirmations? Do you feel like, I know there's a lot of noise with affirmations and people are trying to do that. Do you think it's effective in kids? Is it helpful to build their self-esteem as they get older?
I think it depends on the child. It really takes understanding why I'm doing this and believing in themselves, rather than, okay, Mom told me I have to say this 5 times a day. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. So I think it's it's a building block towards building self-esteem and self-confidence, but alone probably not super effective.
Okay, that's good to know. That's awesome. What are some of the things and trends that you're seeing in mental health? Like you mentioned imposter syndrome. I'm seeing that a lot on social media. What's that all about?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are eager for information, and social media can be good in providing education from credible sources, but it can also be bad, right? In that people might see something and identify with it, but it was posted by a not credible source. So that's an interesting trend, or so to speak, is that if there's a trend in social media, I remember there was a wave of people thinking that they might have autism spectrum disorder from videos they were seeing on TikTok. So we had a bunch of consult requests for concerns for autism. And so I think a new trend on the horizon is this kind of psychedelic approach to treating mental health care. And I see more and more posts about, okay, psilocybin or, MDMA are these keys to treating mental health conditions. So I think that's what's new on the horizon.
Okay. And do you feel like when you have a lot of patients coming your way, they're maybe misinformed and you have to like re-guide them and tell them this is actually what it is in medicine and I have a degree in this?
Yeah, there's a lot of fact checking that we do in the office. So I encourage my patients to come in and bring me things that they see online. And it helps keep me up to date on what's out there. But also we can have a collaborative discussion about what is this and is it really beneficial for you? Is there science behind it? Right. So I actually think it's good for them to come in with their questions and having that discussion of what's kind of backed by science.
That's really good. That's amazing that you do that for your patients and that they can then be educated correctly by someone who's obviously specializing in this field and has studied it. What's like a misconception? So I feel like I know what the difference is, but for anyone that's listening and watching, people say psychologist versus psychiatrist. What is the difference so that people know? Because they're two totally different things.
Yeah, it's so confusing. And to add on to that, all these other acronyms, LPCs, LMSW, mental performance coaches. And it's great that there's more and more mental health resources out there, but it can also be really confusing if someone is misrepresenting what they do or who they work with. And so for your question, psychologists go to graduate school and they receive a doctorate, either a PsyD or a PhD, and are really specialized in providing various types of therapy and being able to clinically diagnose someone as well. Psychiatrists go to medical school, so we go through like OB-GYN rotations, general surgery, and really have a robust medical knowledge background. And then we can prescribe medication as well as doing different types of therapy.
That's amazing. I feel like people get that confused quite a bit. You're like, I am a medical doctor. Like, I actually went to med school for this,
Yeah.
and you have the ability to prescribe. So it's very different.
Exactly. And then there's that misconception that psychiatrists just prescribe and that we overprescribe and that that's all we want to do is throw medication on a problem. And I think that's a much bigger conversation of the healthcare system in America, and that most community psychiatry clinics are quite limited to 15-minute follow-up appointments or whatever the case may be. And that's what really led me to opening this model of psychiatry practices through concierge psychiatry. My patients have direct access to me, and we can really dive deep, and we're not time limited by insurance restrictions of how long our appointments can be.
That's great. That's really wonderful. Because, yeah, I'm sure people come in and if they can open up to you and talk to you and like get through a problem, no matter how much time it takes versus like the 15-minute cutoff, like, I got someone right after you.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your practice and like how you branded it and some of the challenges you faced getting yourself known in the community, just as a business owner.
That's a loaded question. There's
Yeah.
so much. So I started the practice while I was in residency training,
Wow.
which is really uncommon.
Sure.
And so I started putting together the building blocks of the business, staying up really late researching how to start a company, all the different components that go into it. And people
Sure.
often ask me, did you have a mentor? And I wish I had one, but no matter who I was seeking assistance from, it seemed like people were either really busy or didn't really want to help at the time. So I started the practice when I was 26.
Wow.
And then I grew the practice from then till now over the last 4.5 years to 12 clinicians. So now we have a team of 5 psychiatrists, 5 psychologists, a therapist, and a mental performance coach.
Very
And
cool.
so, like I mentioned earlier, initially we were Choulet Wellness. And what does that really mean? I don't know. And that was probably my biggest regret of the business was the name I chose. What I don't regret is the location. So I really made sure to do my market research and see where my ideal clients were likely living and where I could easily position an office to be convenient for them.
Right.
Another factor was that I was in residency, so I wasn't making very much money.
Sure.
And I did not have the marketing dollars to put up billboards everywhere.
Yep.
And so for me, part of my marketing plan was the location. So I made sure to find an office on North Scottsdale Road where I would have a sign on North Scottsdale Road. And I'm like, great, this is part of my lease and I can have this as a visibility. And that is a decision I do not regret. So I regret the name initially, and that's why I kind of honed in on our niche and focused in on that. But then I don't regret the location and really making sure to do your market research, identify where your ideal patients are coming from, and positioning yourself in a way that makes it really convenient to get to you.
That's great. And I think that's so smart. I talk to a lot of different business owners, law firm owners, what have you. And it's like the branding and the brainstorms that go behind that business are so important to the foundation. And you really like did the research and studied it. And I feel like that's what makes the business owner successful. That's great.
Yeah, I really like the phrase that it's passion plus persistence that really make it for a successful entrepreneur. That's kind of the recipe, right? Is you have to be passionate about what you do.
Sure.
And you have to be persistent. Because like you mentioned, there are going to be roadblocks and obstacles and nothing comes easy. But if you have those two things, you can really persevere.
That's great. I love that. That's such a helpful tip to anyone who's trying to be an entrepreneur or is currently and feels like maybe they're stuck. And, we all come up with these challenges that we have to face every day. What are some challenges that you face in your practice as a business owner that you feel like, you need to overcome or you have overcome?
Yeah, I would say last year for me, the biggest challenge was my time. And that all of our time, I feel like as we get older, our health and our time are kind of the most valuable assets we have.
Yes.
And how we choose to spend it is important. And I was realizing last year I was having all of these one-on-one kind of networking meetings that were just eating up my entire calendar. And I would look at the week and, oh my gosh, between drive time and in-person meetings and all of this and adding them at the beginning or at the end of the day, it was just like really taking over my schedule. So I was like, no more in 2024. I'm going to set really good boundaries. And I did. I stuck to it and it really changed my life. So Any one-on-one meeting request kind of goes through an evaluation of what the purpose is. And then if I do schedule it, it's a 15-minute Zoom, and I allot those only on Thursdays. So I like got
Love
really
that.
strict with it, and it changed my life. I don't feel obligated to add on that Tuesday 8 a.m. meeting or that Friday 4 p.m.
Yep.
It just goes into Thursdays. And if it makes it through, it gets scheduled for a 15-minute virtual time slot.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to implement that because I felt the same. You want to be accessible to people in your network. And if you can like use their business or they can use your services, you can build a relationship, great.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, those coffee and lunch meetings do eat up a lot of time. So being just really set with your boundaries like that is so wonderful.
Yeah, I loved it. And the other thing that I was feeling frustrated by too is I think people miss what networking should be. And networking, in my opinion, should be building genuine relationships and connections with people.
Yeah.
It should not be a sales pitch. And now I found myself often getting asked, how did you grow your network, or how did you grow your community? And that's my answer is like, I'm always focused on what I can do for the person in front of me, and never do I start a meeting explaining what I do or how I could help someone.
Sure.
So I think between that and then the in-person meetings, I was just feeling frustrated that people were not networking effectively. And it always felt like there was an immediate ask or a sales pitch.
I feel the same. It's always like a sales pitch. And then you kind of dread that because you're like, we're not going to lunch to like get to know each other. You're pitching me your services. And like, I just feel like, all right, it's not as genuine.
Exactly. So that's why I like starting with the 15-minute virtual. I can kind of feel out what the intention's going to be, or the direction of the relationship, and then move accordingly from there.
That's great. I love that. Well, I feel like you just, we had a little session here, and now you're inspiring me to do the same. So I will do that. Set the boundaries.
It's so important.
It really is. Is that something that you talk a lot with like patients, and something that's really popping up in mental health nowadays is the boundary setting?
Yeah. And maybe not even mental health specifically, but in my office, because in my office, I'm so focused on how can I help the person in front of me perform better in their life, whether that be their personal life, professional life, relationships, athletically, whatever it is. I want you to walk out with tools and tips that can make you a better person and perform better.
That's great.
So oftentimes I find that by doing so, I'm discussing boundaries with people of how can you start to be okay saying no and doing things that align with your values and goals.
Right, because it feels like when people say no, or when I say no, I feel like I'm being mean. And I don't want to feel that way. So then you're more inclined to be like, sure, I'll do it, or set it on the calendar. And it's kind of a difficult, you have to be intentional with saying no. I do at least.
Yeah, because then if you think about it, if you're saying yes to these things that you're not truly passionate about, then you're not feeling great or accomplished by the end of the day. Your feeling at the end of the day might be, oh, I feel unaccomplished, or I felt like I wasted my time today, or whatever that feeling might be. And it's a spiral, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're doing that kind of thing every day, you're going to likely feel a lack of accomplishment and a lack of fulfillment.
Interesting. It all stems from somewhere.
It does.
And I love how like you can pinpoint that, and then just fixing something small like that, setting your boundary, Thursday meetings only on Zoom, can change the trajectory of that.
Right. And that's not what you normally get by going to a psychiatrist's office, is kind of this life audit of the checklist of all your things you're doing. But I'll start a session by asking someone, so what'd you do this week that you could not stand? Like, what were the tasks that you did? What was the admin work you got sucked into? And let's go from there and problem solve. So I'm not about fluff. I definitely want to give my patients actionable strategies so that we can work quickly, and they'll come back the next week with like, okay, these are all the things that I did that went better, and what's next? Like, where can we go from here?
That's great. Do you work with a lot of like executives, business owners, I don't want to say high profile people, but people that are high goal oriented?
I would say that's almost all the adults I see are high performing professionals and athletes, whether they're entrepreneurs, CEOs of large companies, doctors, lawyers, other people in the health and wellness space. How can we take your day-to-day life and make it better?
That's great. I love that. That's wonderful.
Thanks.
Tell me a little bit about Forbes. You're a writer for Forbes, which is just incredible. How
Thanks.
did that even start? How did you get started with that?
Yeah, so people ask me often, like, how can they get into writing for Forbes and like give me all the ingredients to this recipe. But essentially, a while ago, I committed to this is a long story, but basically, I was my own PR person for a while because I could
Yeah.
not afford the marketing coming out of residency and fellowship, and I did an additional year in child training. So I was my own PR person. I would pitch different platforms. I would just try to really take a content marketing approach and just write for as many places as I could that had high visibility. So initially it started with psychologytoday.com. I'm not sure if you've heard of that,
Yeah.
but it's a big platform people use to search for their therapist or psychiatrist. And I just pitched them, said, I see you don't have any writer for sports and performance psychiatry. I filled out the form on their website and pitched the blog. And within 48 hours, the editor was like, yes, we love this idea. We haven't had that. We want you to write for us. So I told myself I would write one article a week for however long and just see where that would get me. And about 6 months into it, I was like telling my husband, I'm like, I don't know if this is worth it. I'm spinning my wheels writing for Psychology Today. It's a free gig, and I don't know if anyone's getting any value out of it. Then I got an email from a Forbes editor. She said she was a Forbes editor. Like, it sounded very generic. Like,
Right.
Hi, Dr. Choulet. We saw your blog on here's the pasted website. We are interested in having you write for Forbes Sports Money. And as all good hospitals teach us, check the domain, make sure it's not spam.
Yeah.
And it was from an @forbes.com email address.
Wow.
So I responded. We did the phone interview the same day, and I was onboarded and enrolled. And it was the editor of Forbes Sports Money that wanted me to write specifically on athlete mental health. And with Forbes, they give you a swim lane. So my swim lane that I could write about, which you're definitely confined to, is athlete mental health and sports psychiatry. So that's definitely a different podcast episode, is all about how writing for Forbes has changed my life this year. It's incredible and crazy, but they don't pay a whole lot, but just the people and the opportunities and the platform has just been incredible.
And how long have you been doing that?
Since February, I've made it a goal for
This
myself
year.
to write one article a week for them every week, and so I've stuck to that. Yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing. And look at like what your year. I mean, you're just all over the place. You're
Thanks.
traveling, you're at conferences, you're on podcasts, you're doing interviews. Like I'm seeing you all over on social media, which I love. I'm like,
Thank
you
you.
go, girl. Like you just came from a conference. I think you said in Atlanta, right?
Yes, yeah. I
Okay.
was speaking in Atlanta at the Concierge Medicine Forum, and then tomorrow I go to Vegas for a conference before we leave for Italy on Thursday. So it's just been one thing after another, but I'm loving it. Again, it's passion plus perseverance.
Right, that's
Yeah.
the formula. How do you stay balanced yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I think about people that are in this space
Mm-hmm.
and what you do. How do you stay balanced and make sure that you can go on? Because you're taking care of a lot of people, you know? It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So I hate the term work-life balance, and I love the term work-life integration. And so really I'm just constantly interweaving my personal and professional responsibilities in a way that aligns with my values and morals and goals. And so for me, that looks like scheduling, I don't know, my work day. I'm really regimented about my calendar. I schedule everything in basically 15-minute increments, and I'm really diligent about not scheduling any meetings till 10 a.m. and ending meetings by 4:30, whether that's business meetings or patient meetings. And then from 8 to 10 a.m., I'm usually doing my own administrative work for either the company or for media or whatever that might be. And then I spend time with my daughter in the late afternoon evenings, and when she goes to bed, I get right back to it. And so for me, I'm just really regimented about my calendar. And so that allows me to stay not stressed, focused, productive, and not get stuck in what I see a lot of entrepreneurs getting stuck in, which is the anxiety of basically anticipating what's to come.
Yes, there's a lot of anxiety with that. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about like, instead of having lists of to-dos, you put your list into the calendar. Is that kind of what you're doing when you're doing all of the calendaring? Like because you said 8 to 10 is like your admin, marketing time.
Yeah, I think there's two issues there. So one is tasks, right? So
Okay.
I'm a big fan of having tasks in a very organized way, prioritized with due dates, who they're assigned to, all that.
Sure.
But then separately, I do agree with time blocking. So with
Okay.
that, it would be like, okay, from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to write my Forbes article. And then I work diligently on just writing that, and I turn on my do not disturb notifications, and I'm doing what I call deep work in that
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 9 to 10 a.m., that might be like researching clinic sites in a state that I want to open a practice in. So I do agree with adding tasks if they're for concentrated time and reasons
Sure.
into your calendar, but not just saying like schedule doctor appointment
Yeah.
and scheduling that. So I think they're
Sure.
different. So scheduling by time blocking, I think is very effective for productivity, but then separately maintaining that task list and actually working through it, not just adding things to
Right.
it, is really helpful. Yeah.
That's that important component is that
Yeah.
you actually complete it and you actually
Right.
do it and stick to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you mentioned your daughter, and I love that you're a mom,
Hmm.
and I love women entrepreneurs who are also moms. Talk to me about that. What is it like to balance motherhood with your practice area?
I think it took a lot of life planning to open my practice before having my daughter. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was really important to put basically all my TLC, like I do with my daughter, into the business when I opened it. And so by the time I had her, I was really lucky that there were systems in place and processes, and there was a way to do
Mm-hmm.
things. And I wasn't trying to figure out the key pieces to that puzzle. Because I do
Right.
think it would be very challenging to open a business and have a baby at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention, I went back to work 3 weeks later because I was working with a professional athletic team at the time, and they were entering the playoffs. And so I just went right back into work mode. And I don't regret that at all because I do love what I do. But again, it takes a lot of intentional scheduling to effectively be in multiple places at once.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's trying to be multiple places at once, but
Yeah.
if you can focus in on what you're supposed to be doing at hand at that time, I feel like it allows you to be more present
Mm-hmm.
and not have that guilt of not tending to either family life or work, what have you. So,
Yeah, and that anxiety, right? Of like,
yeah.
oh, I need to be doing this. But if
Yeah.
it's already scheduled tomorrow, you're going to be okay. Or if
Yes.
you already have time allotted to complete those 3 high priority tasks of the day, then you're not sitting with that anxiety. So that's all the small tools that we can all implement. That's just easy to integrate into our day-to-day lives to really make things so much better.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Talk to me a little bit about what do you like to do for fun? Like, what do you enjoy as an outlet for yourself when you're not tending to your patients or?
Yeah, I'm in this mode of life where work is really fun to me. So
Okay.
I'm really having a great time. I'm not feeling burned out, and so that is one big thing. But another is I started Scottsdale Professionals Collective, which is a networking group of doctors and attorneys
Okay.
in the Valley, and we meet every other month for fun events. Like we did a Diamondback Suite experience over the summer.
Cool.
We're having a holiday party in November where it's just a bunch of entrepreneurs getting together and hanging out and like getting to know each other and building authentic connections. So to me, I find that to be a really enjoyable outlet that's outside of the office.
That's great. I love
Yeah.
that. And it's nice because it's just local and it's people that have the same challenges as you do when it
Yeah.
comes to running their practice and that work. I don't want to say work life balance. What's the term you use?
Integration, yeah.
Work life integration.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to start using that term. And it's nice to have people that are doing similar things that you can get to know and bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of
Yeah.
work-life integration is we're all doing fun things together. It's recreational time, it's outside the office, but it's
Sure.
also developing us professionally too.
Yeah.
And that is a great example of interweaving personal and professional things that align with your goals.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just building a sense of community,
Yeah.
which is really nice.
Right. And a good
Awesome.
community.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
great community.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What is on the horizon for you, your practice? What do you see coming up in the next few months and year?
Yeah, so tomorrow I head out to the Applied Association of Sports Psychology conference in Vegas, which I'm really excited to attend a conference and not speak at it for once.
Ooh, yeah.
So I'm just attending. I'm really looking forward to it. And then on December 1st, the Washington Commanders of the NFL are holding their inaugural mental health game versus the Tennessee Titans. And so I'm flying out to DC. Thank you to the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. And they've asked me to speak on the pregame panel at the field. So I'm really excited about that.
That sounds so epic and cool. I mean, way to end your year. Yeah. I mean, that has been an incredible 12 months that you've had writing for Forbes and all these opportunities, and ending it with that is just like, you're on the high note.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think it's important to just keep putting yourself out there to different opportunities and say yes when it aligns with your goals and values.
Right. That's amazing. Well, I'm so excited to see all of that. I'll be watching for you and all of your content that you post and reading your articles, because I think it's so important. It's so relatable to anybody. We all obviously, you know, have to deal with mental health and have control of it. And whether you're a business owner, or whether you don't own a business, or you're a mom, or you're not a parent, there's just so many things that we can learn from your platform that you post, and all the content is really educational. And thank you so much for joining us today. Your insight was invaluable. And tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so our clinic is chouletperformance.com, or you could find me on Instagram at Brook Choulet MD. And I really appreciate you having me today. And this conversation was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Talk Legal to Me. Remember, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple. And if you want to watch along, visit my YouTube channel at Lawyer Gordi. Until next time, stay informed, stay legal, and stay fabulous, besties.